All right, welcome to class 3 of Excel Core. My name is Don, and pants are still optional. Now, first, a few things to go through. Just got done with class 2, and that was kind of a mess, so I apologize. It was just the way that I set up the website. I'm going to make sure that this time around, I'm going to walk through it and make sure that everything works. Also, I've gotten a lot of responses from what we could do to make this better. Most everybody was saying like, hey, this is great. One person asked if I could have alternative type of times that people can call me up or write me a question, etc. And I think that just go ahead and send me an email. If we can go back and forth, that's great. Otherwise, we could set up a special time just for that. So rather than put on yet another time so that people can meet, just give me an email and we can go from there. All right, and we'll figure out what time we can meet and if we could share a screen or something along those lines. All right, as you can see, I'm right now on, what I did was I downloaded the session 3 stuff, and this session is going to be all about functions. This is what I love because this is going to give us the ability to do very specific stuff, but we don't have to program it. We can just ask the computer to do things for us, such as sum stuff up or find the maximum and things like that. All right, so if we started it off, we're going to go first here to if examples. Now, again, with all of the questions that I ask, which I'll just go ahead and move this out of the way, I believe one of those is going to be, hey, which one, is for class 3, what is the most used function? And that's going to be if. So if you get this is going to be one of those questions that's asked. So if you get the question, what is the most used function? That's going to be the if. So on here, we have a simple grade book. John, Bill, Patrick, Andy, and Chris. Some people have passed and some people have failed. What I'd like to do is I'd like to know if they've passed. I want the computer to put down the word grade 7. Otherwise, put down grade 6. So I'll zoom in a little bit. And now come over here. All right. And I'm going to start off by saying equals because that's how I start all functions and formulas. IF. As I'm typing this in, Excel looks through all of the functions that it has and saying, here's the ones that match. If error, if NA, and if N or if S or ifs. And that will see which one you want. It's like, hey, I think it's something like if. You could type in if, you'll look down all the list, and it'll give you a tooltip to explain what's going on there. For example, for if error, it returns the value if error expression if an error is presented. Or if NA, that says returns a value you specify if the expression resolves to £NA. This is the one we want, if. This is also selected. So now I could say, hey, this is what I want, and I want it to be completed. So I'm going to hit tab. And when I hit tab, that will do a tab complete as I'm typing stuff in there. Not so hard for if, but a couple of the other ones, I'll show you something better. So first off is the logical test. What two things are we trying to do? And I want to say, is C3, what two things are we trying to compare? If the value that's in C3 is equal to the word, quote, pass, P-A-S-S. Now, question comes up, hey Don, is this case sensitive? I don't know, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a lowercase pass to see if it works. Comma, what is the value of true? I want to put in the word, quote, grade 7, quote, comma, what happens if the value is false? Value of false is, quote, grade 6, quote. Because I started off a paren, I have to end the paren right there, and voila. Because it is pass, and it looks like it is not case sensitive, John passes, and I put down the word grade 7. Of course, I'm going to, instead of writing all these things out, lower right-hand side, the autofill handle, double-click, finds the end. There we go. So before, I was checking out to see if one word matches another, or if the cell matches a word. But what happens if it matches a number? Now, if you've never purchased a house, or built a house, They just don't give you $100,000 and say, hey, go build your house, because they're afraid that you're going to go to Vegas to try to double that money so you don't have a mortgage, but of course that never happens. So you would lose the $100,000 and they wouldn't have a house to hawk, so that's a bad thing. So they give it to you in draws. After a certain amount of time, you'll bring in all of the receipts that have been generated during that time period, and then the bank will cut you a check to cover those receipts. So right here we have the Ridge Creek project, and we have receipts coming in every week, and there's the cost. What I'd like to do is, if this is a large project, I want to know what the cumulative cost is right now, and rather than have the same cumulative cost copied all the way down for the next 3 years. So the formula is to the right-hand side. I'm going to say is equal to if paren. The logical test, again, is D15 is equal to 0. So I want to say, does the draw for that week equal to 0? Comma, value if true. So if the value is true, what do I want to put in? I want to put in a 0. Comma, value if false. And then I want to say, well, take whatever the draw was, D15, and add to it the previous cumulative cost, E14. And paren. 72,000, which you'd say, well, wait a second, there's 92,000 up above. That's correct, but the reason that I started here was I wanted to show you that autofill works both going up and down. Lower right-hand side, autofill handle, drag it up to right before 92,000, and then I can double-click and bring it all the way down. I was trying to allude before that accounting is different than currency format. Accounting has the dollar signs on the left-hand side, and when there's zero money, it'll put a tick in there. So accountants don't like zero money because they always think that there should be a 1 or something before that. So if there is truly a 0, we'll put a tick there, or a minus sign. Now, I'll put in a new cumulative cost, a new $90,000, whoops, $90,000, and $416,000 comes up as the cumulative cost. All right, so far what we've been dealing with is black and white. Either they've passed or they've not passed. They've had a draw or they haven't had a draw. But now what I'd like to do is figure out those shades of gray. And nothing works better for shades of gray than a grade book. If somebody gets above a certain amount, we're going to give them an A. If they get above a certain amount but below the first mark, then we're going to give them a B, etc. So the formula is there to the right-hand side. Now, usually I would allow people to go out and type this stuff in there and you'd flounder a while and we would go on, but I'm going to show you how to do something as complicated as this in very small steps. So first off, what I want to do is I want to find out if they get an A. So it's equal to if paren. The logical test, I'm going to see if C24 is greater than 89, comma. One thing I haven't shown you yet, which is coming up right now, it says value of true, and that's actually in hard brackets. The hard bracket means that that is optional. You don't have to put in value of true or value of false. What that would do is, if you didn't have either, it would just give you true or false. In this case, I want to say the value of true is comma A, or excuse me, quote A quote, they get an A. Otherwise, comma, they get an F, quote F quote, and paren. When I hit it, John gets an A. Copy it all the way down. Everybody else gets an F. Everybody hates John. Now, instead of getting an F, what I want to do is I want to give them another condition to see if they get a B. So I'm going to go back to my grade A, hit F2 to bring me into that formula, and remove the 3 characters that make up the false statement. Now, put in another conditional. If paren C24 is greater than 80, comma, give them a B, quote B quote, otherwise give them an F, quote F quote. Now, we as humans know that no matter how many parens we have at the very beginning, we could close it all off with one paren. Computers aren't nearly that smart, so what we need to do is every time we open up a paren, we've also got to close the parenthesis. So in this case, we have 2 parentheses at the end. John still has the A, but when I double click to copy it down, I can see that Andy gets a B. Awesome. Let's go on further. F2, remove the F, and now put in another conditional. If C24 is greater than 70, comma, give them a C, quote, C quote, otherwise, comma, give them an F, quote, F quote, n paren. Copy that down. More and more people get a different grade. And of course, now I'll just go on to the easy one to say that they get either a D or an F. If paren C24 is greater than 60, comma, give them a D quote, otherwise, comma, give them an F quote, n paren. Click and drag it down. And now we have something called a nested if. You use this a lot when it's not as simple as just a black and white kind of thing, yes or no. You're going to nest those in to get grades. All right, coffee break. All right, next one, ands. Sometimes we want to find out if they meet multiple conditions. And in this case, we're going to use the function called and. So I'm looking for numbers that are greater than 10 and less than 30. That's going to be equal to and paren. It says logical 1, and I could see that logical 2 is in there, but it is also optional. So I could just have one logical in there, one thing that I'm comparing. In this case, what I want to do is I want to find out if A2 is greater than 10, comma, and no, if A2 is less than 30. I always like to think about what should happen before I actually run it. In this case, I'm figuring that it's going to come up to be a false, because that's what's going to be returned, either true or false. Do both of these match or do they not? And in this case, it's going to be false because 10 is not greater than 10. It's greater than or equal to. When I copy that down, 20 should be true because it's greater than 10 and less than 30. And 30 will also be false because 30 is not less than 30. It's equal to. Enter, that's false. Click on it, lower right hand side, double click, look at that. Exactly what I would have expected. So that's the and. The and says both conditions have to be met, or as many conditions as we put in. The A2 greater than 10 and less than 30. The flip side to that one is one called or. Now the or just says any one of those conditions has to be met. So I'm going to say is equal to or paren. The first logical is A2 greater than 10, which should be no because it's equal to, or is A2 less than 30, which it is true. Since one of them is true, this is going to be true, and all of them will be true. True. Lower right hand side, autofill handle, double click, everything's true. Awesome. Coffee break. Now, for today and date, what I want to do is I want to find out what today's date is. Because if we're dealing with debts, if we're dealing with rent or anything like that, it depends upon what today is to do your calculations. How much time has elapsed. So rather than type in the day, I can just ask it, what is today's date? Which is equal to TOD. And as soon as I got to TOD, the only thing left is today, which returns the current date. Because I'm lazy, I don't want to type out the rest of it, I could hit tab, which will complete the rest of it. And notice that this is a function that doesn't have any additional arguments to it. So what we're looking at is just open paren, and I've got to close that paren. So it's going to show me today's date, 3/31/2020. Awesome. Now, what happens if I'm looking for 7 days from now? I could say is equal to today, open paren, close paren, and then I can add to it the number of whole days I'd like to go forward. So 7 days from now, plus 7, that's going to be equal to 4/7/2020. Beautiful. You could go forwards and backwards in time. So I put it in there with today, but since 3/31 is today's date, I could say is equal to B2 minus 7 days. 7 days ago was 3/24. All right. Now, this is giving me the date, but sometimes people will say, hey, wait a second, I put in a date and it gave me a number. That is correct. So, for example, I'm going to put in 1/1/2020. All right, that gives me a date. That gives me a date because it's formatted to show me a date. If it says formatted as to give me a number, what I will see is something like 43,831. What that means is that 43,831 days have elapsed since epoch, which is the starting date that Microstart starts to count from. So 43,000 plus days have elapsed since January 1st, 1900, which is where Microsoft began to count. So that's how we would be able to add days and minus days, plus 7 and minus 7, is because it just sees those as a number of dates behind there, or a number of days behind there, and it's easy enough to subtract or add. That's the same reason that sometimes you'll say, oh, I have 565 here, and instead of getting a number, I get a date. So if I come down here to short date, it shows July 18th, 1901. Because now it just says that number is going to be a date, that many days since epoch, which was 1/1/1900, and that's what we get. All right. Now, sometimes we want to build our own dates. So I know what the month is, I know what the day is, I know what the year is. I want to make that into a date, this one right here. We could go through some pretty nasty mathematics to find out how many days have elapsed, because not all years have 365 days. So you'd have to figure out which ones are leap years, etc., how many of that's passed, but that is way too much work. So I'm going to say, let's find out what July 4th, 2020 is. I can create that date by saying is equal to date and then tab. And now it says what's the year, what's the month, what's the day. The year in this case is going to be B9, comma. The month is going to be B8, comma, and then the day, whoops, sorry, messed that one up, B7, comma, and then B8. So, July 4th, 2020. Beautiful. Likewise, I can now rip that date apart. So if I'm looking for truly 1 month ahead of time, whether it's 30 days, 28 days, or 31, I could say I want to add +1 to that month. But to do that, I need to be able to break that date apart. So to get the month, I'm going to say is equal to month, paren, and then what's the serial number, which is just the date. In this case, C8 is equal to, next one, day. The day of the month, paren, serial number, date. And then the year is going to be year. Awesome. So 7/4/2020 gives me a date, and then I tore it apart and got the information here. I'm going to now change it so that it'll say 1/1, and I can see that it changes not only the date, but the torn apart version of it. All right, coffee break. Now that we did this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to, some of you might have had a homework problem like this. This happened in one of my first classes that I was teaching, and they said, wow, this was pretty difficult. How do we do something like this? And I said, no sweat. Let's go through it together. So it says, if a country is Canada or Mexico, the order amount is greater than 1,000, and the order is placed in July, the cell should be shipped by air, otherwise shipped by ground. All right, now let's break this apart. If the country is Canada or Mexico, so or, it's given us the formula right there, or the function, is equal to or, paren, A2, that's the country for this one, is equal to Canada, comma, A2 equal to Mexico. Quote, end paren. That's true. Remember, most of the time it's giving us back a true or a false. So that says, yep, Canada, that's what I would have expected. Double click. I see all of Canada and Mexico is true. USA is false. So far, so good. Now it says, if the country is Canada or Mexico, order amount is greater than 1,000. That's kind of like an implicit and in there. So what I want to do is I want to put an and at the very beginning. So, and one of those conditions have to be met, comma, and now the order amount is greater than 1,000. So C2 is greater than 1,000. Okay, now I'm going to copy that down. If this is correct, I should see that the order amount here should turn false and false for at least those two. That's true. Copy it down. Look at that, 2 falses. So far I'm getting the right answers, what I would have expected. Come back into it. If the country is Canada or Mexico, the order amount is greater than 1,000 and the order is placed in July. So I need to say Canada or Mexico greater than 1,000, and the last one is that the month for the order date, B2, is equal to 7. Okay, I could hit this, but I want to make sure that I find one that's false. So right here, that will be false. Canada, August 12th, right here, this true should turn into a false when I copy it down. Click, lower right hand side, double click, and look at that. That one turned false. Yay, all works. Now the last part is a cell in the remark should show ship by air, otherwise ship by ground. So that's pretty easy because we were just doing that. It said if this one, we have the true or false, comma, if it's true it should be ship by air, comma, else ship by end paren, ship by air, get down, and we have ship by air or ship by ground. Beautiful. Cheers. All right, now the next one, I want to do count versus count A versus count if. Let's make sure that I didn't go, there you go. All right, so what I want to do is I want to find out how to count stuff. I'm going to add in a new sheet right here, zoom in, and I'll explain what the counts are. The first one is count, which counts the number of cells that contain something, whether it's a number or a letter. Count just counts the number of the cells that have numbers. Count A has numbers and letters, but the one that I use most frequently is count if, which counts the cell if it contains something that I'm looking for. So for example, I could have apples, oranges, peaches, and apples. And I'm looking up to find out how many times apples is in there. I'm going to say is equal to COU. Now, by the time I hit COU, I can still see that there's lots of different ways to count. Come down here to count if, and then tab. Boom. The range that I'm looking for. Since it's waiting for me to put in some cell locations, I could click on A3 and drag down to A6, or you could do it shorthand by typing it in, by clicking A3, typing in A3, colon, says there's the range to A6. And I can see a blue border goes around my range. Comma, quote, and what am I looking for? I'm looking for apples. End paren. Boom, 2. That's good, but there's no way in heck that I would give this to somebody with the expectation of them being able to type in what they're looking for without breaking my formula eventually. When they break it, then they call me up, I gotta go to work, I don't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to type down here in A9 what they were looking for. So if I'm looking for apples, right there, click on this, and now instead of apples, I'm looking at whatever is in A9. 2. Awesome. Now I can go here, instead of saying apples, I can type in oranges, I get 1, and I can type in pears, and I get 0. Perfect. Does this work with just text? Nope, you could actually do it with numbers. So for example, if I have 32, 54, 75, and 86, I'm looking for certain numbers. I'm not looking for a specific number, I'm going to look for numbers that match a criteria, such as greater than 55. So I'm going to say is equal to 50, or is greater than 55. I'm going to say is equal to count if, paren, the range from B3 to B6, comma, and then the criteria, greater than 55. End paren, and I can see that two of them are greater, 75 and 86. Let's change it around. Less than 80. I can get 3. Now, again, I'm looking for greater than or less than in this case, and that will work, but you could also look for a specific number. So I could go for 32, that'll give me 1, or if I go for 33, that gives me 0. Now, you might have noticed that I was still talking while I was doing something else. I unfortunately don't have the benefit of you guys looking down at your keyboards and typing as I'm typing in the 32 and 54. You're watching a movie instead. So what I did was I kind of adjusted what I see here, apples, oranges, and peaches and apples, and I added something. So for example, if I come down here to where it says pears, I could type in apples, and now when I hit enter, I get 0. Nothing more frustrating than seeing I have apples here, and I don't see it's not working. I can see 2 apples up above. I can see that I'm looking in the right spot, but it doesn't work out. Well, that's because what I was doing when I was talking before was I was adding a space at the very end of each one of these words. This is common if you do this in a database or even bring in stuff from the web, because the web doesn't care if you have spaces in it or not. Your browser will crush that down to one space. So because of that, we might have to clean up our data before we start trying to find, before we start manipulating it. So this is what I do frequently also in Excel. I'm first going to add in a new column. So to the left of B, right click, give me a context sensitive heading, insert, new column. I'm going to say is equal to trim, which will say it removes all spaces from a text string except for single spaces between words. So it's going to remove them from the beginning, from the end, and if there's multiple ones in the middle, it'll just leave one. So I'll say trim A3, paren. Apples, I'll click it to drag it all the way down. And I'm going to take both of these, since I'm just looking for apples without a space and the count, I could copy this over, and I can see that apples will give me 2. Up here, I'll show you really what it does. Trim, quote, first quarter earnings, and paren, this one. Lots of spaces at the beginning, lots of spaces at the end, a couple of spaces in between each word, and now when I hit enter, first quarter earnings. You might be saying, well, that's great. You've now cleaned up the data, but how are you going to make sure that it stays clean? Because right now there's a formula behind it. Well, that's where we copy it, Control C, come over here, and now instead of pasting it, which would paste the formula, I'm going to paste the values, 1, 2, 3. And now I have first quarter earnings without spaces. All right, beautiful. Cheers. Now I want to say the quantity, whatever it is, plus, so I have to put that in quotes, quote plus quote, pretzel, A2, pretzel, and I want to put the equal sign in there. So I'm going to say quote equals quote, pretzel, A3. So when I hit enter, it should say the quantity 2 plus 2 equals 4. And it does, but it looks terrible. Now it says the quantity 2 plus 2 equals 4. So there's no spaces. Even though I've put spaces in my formula, those spaces aren't going to be reflected unless they're within quotes. So I'm going to say that I want it to have spaces after the y, both sides of the plus, and then both sides of the equal. Hit enter, and now it says the quantity 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's awesome. Because this is now when it changes, I'm going to say 56 and then 89, it automatically writes out the quantity 56 plus 89 gives me 145. Now, let's just say I've been doing this now for 17 years, and I know that there's somebody, at least somebody out there saying, Don, when in the hell would we ever use this? Good question. Now, everything that I show you here is stuff that I've used in what I would call an enterprise situation, which is where I would create a spreadsheet that would do something, hand it over to somebody with the hopes that I never have to hear from them again because they use it and they use it correctly. Where I used it here was somebody who was doing day trading for multiple people, and I was scared blind that where we would have Microsoft MSFT, that it would that it would break that apart, or it would truncate that to MSF, as we see that it can do with all other text in Excel. And instead of buying 50,000 shares of Microsoft, they bought 50,000 shares of MSF, and then they come back to me and say, hey, this was the wrong trade, you owe me $250,000. So what I did was I just said all trades are then spelled out by in a sentence, and if they didn't read that sentence correctly, that was not my fault. So that's where I use it. When I'm programming, I concatenate lots of strings together, so it is a commonly used function. Now, again, I went ahead and did this function in here, and I kind of spelled it out. Some people would say, well, you know what? I just want to see the function. Is there any way to do that without seeing the answer? There is. If you hold down the control key and then hit the grave accent, which is to the left of the 1, it usually is the tilde grave accent there, and if you hit that, that will switch what Excel does. So instead of giving you the values that you see there, you're getting the equal signs, what the formulas are. So you can see that it's A1 plus A2, and then my A4 is the formula that I did. And to get it back, it's going to be Control, grave accent again, and it brings back. So that is a toggle that says, instead of seeing what the values of each one of the cells are, we can now see what the formulas within the cells are. All right, coffee break. All right, ceiling and floor, also known kind of as rounding. Now, we've known how to round since we've been in 4th grade. If we have 4.5 and we're rounding to the nearest whole number, we're going to round it up to 5. If we have 4.4, we're going to round it down to 4. That works for most things, but say you're a wholesaler. We don't want to break the cartons, so we could actually sell them, we can upsell them more if we want, and we don't break a carton, and we want to charge them for that too. Instead of me floundering around, let's do an example. So say I have 23 people, and I could put in people per car. I could put in 4 people per car. Now, how many cars do I need? Well, that is equal to the 23 people divided by the 4 people per car, and I get 5 3/4 cars. Hello, Enterprise. I need 5 3/4 cars. Just bring 6. I'll take a hacksaw to the trunk of the last one. Can't do that. So what do I want to do? I want to round it up always. F2 to bring me back into the formula, and now I'm going to type in ceiling. There's 2 of them there. There's the ceiling with the warning symbol to it, and then there's also ceiling.math. The ceiling.math is the newer way to do it. It does basically the same thing as ceiling down here. So I'm just going to say ceiling, tab. What's the number? In this case, it's 5.75, or E2 divided by E3, and then to the nearest whole number, or to the nearest significance, excuse me. So I'm going to say to the nearest whole number, which would be a 1. Ones. Enter. So 23 people with 4 people per car would require 6 cars. If I typed in 24, that's still 6 cars. But now when I get to the 27th car, that gives me 7 cars. Awesome. Now, Let's do it in reverse. What happens if we always want to round down? That would be floor. So I have pennies. I have 235 pennies. How many dollars do I have? Well, that's going to be the number of pennies divided by 100. $2.35. Now that would work if we had pieces of 8, but we don't. So I'm going to round down, or floor. Oops, let's just do the floor to the nearest whole number. $2 is equal to the pennies minus the dollars times 100. $2.35. 5.33, $5.33. And we know because of PEMDAS that we didn't have to put parentheses around it. Normally we might have to say H3 times 100, which would give us 500. So 533 minus 500 would give me 33 cents. But because of PEMDAS, I knew that H3 times 100 would be done first. And it would give us $5 and then 33 cents. All right, beautiful. I'll click on lookup. Now lookup, I can go through and say, hey, some things aren't defined by a formula. We've got these settings empirically. We've tested it out this way. This is about red. We've tested it out another way. This is about orange. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to find out when I put in a certain frequency what the color is. So I'm going to say 4.19. Oops, sorry. Let's try that again. 4.91. Now what's the color? I want to LOO, which will look up. And now what is the value that I'm looking up? Whatever is here on A9, comma. Lookup vector is the next piece that is highlighted. Notice it doesn't say array because the vector means it has to go from smallest to largest. If everything is out of order, this won't work. So your numbers that you're looking up, or even your text that you're looking up, has to be in order. So the vector is going to go from A2 to A7, comma, the result vector. What do I want it to return? I want it to return the color, B2 to B7, and paren. Enter. 4.91 is orange. I would have thought it was closer to yellow, but orange is fine. Let's go ahead and make that 5. 5 still orange. 5.1 still orange. It's not until we actually get just a little bit higher, 7.3, etc. Whoops, 5.1, 3 in this case, and boom, it goes to yellow. Why is this? This is because the people who helped create spreadsheets were accountants, and this is how our tax system works. If you make $24,999.99, you're in one tax bracket until you get that 1 penny more, and then you're in a new tax bracket. So likewise, it doesn't matter if you make 7.4, be violet, or 74. Once you go past that last large number, you're stuck there. That's the last one. Now, what happens if I don't quite reach the first frequency? So if I just make it 4, then I get pound NA, and I get a phone call, and I have to go to work. And I don't want to go to work, so I got to make sure that that doesn't happen. Why did that happen? Because 4 doesn't reach the lowest portion of our frequency. So what I'm going to do in this case, I could put an if error in there, but in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a new frequency that it will never hit. I'll click on 2, right click, give me a context sensitive menu, and insert. I'll say frequency -99, and that is not a color. Still get pound NA. Well, I want to change it so that I have the new array in there, the new cell. So F2, I can see that I have my red border around my range and then the purple border. And instead of actually typing it in, all I'm going to do is go over to an edge, grab on the corner, and drag it up. And now I can see that -99 is not a color. Hit enter. 4 is not a color. Awesome. All right. I'm going to go here, and I still haven't gotten to the ones that I was going to talk about. All right. VLOOKUP. Now, VLOOKUP is what happens when we don't have just one to another. When I want to look up a certain value, and I could look up things in other locations. So for example, what I want to do is I want to look up the value for 1 in this table, and then I want to be able to say, well, what is its density? So let me take a step back. So we have air here, and we get a lot of our measurements through empirical data. We go out there, we measure it, and we say, yep, this is what it's going to be. So we said that if we have the density at approximately 1 atmosphere, the viscosity is going to be this, and the temperature is going to be this. As we change our density here, we're going to change the viscosity and the temperature, and I might want to see either the viscosity or the temperature. So if I have 1 here, I want to look up something. I'm going to say is VLOOKUP. The value that I'm looking up here is 14, or excuse me, A14, which is 1, comma, the table array. I'm going to start off by just saying A4 and clicking down here to C12, comma, and now the column index number. What number do I want it to be returned? The number I want returned in this case was 1. I'm looking for, if I have air at 1 kilogram per cubic meter, what is the closest value that I have that I didn't go over? And paren, 0.946. Awesome. Now, what happens if I was looking for the viscosity? Now, instead of column 1, I want to look for column 2, 2.17. Or for the temperature, click in here, instead of the second column, I can go to the third column, and it says that it's 100. Come down here to 0.5, gives me new pieces of information. And yes, there is no way that I would normally be typing in information right there. I would have it as a drop down. It's one of those things that you could do with data. Right here, data and data validation. And I believe that there's one here that says data validation. You can have a drop down to it. So you can see, are you looking for density, viscosity, or temperature? All right, beautiful. On to strings. Now, a lot of times we get information and we want to tear it apart because, again, they lumped it all together for us. And in this case, I'm going to show you how. I'm going to say the quick brown fox, and doing that, I'm going to copy it down 5 times. Drag it down. Now, what happens if I wanted to grab the first portion of that piece of text? For example, if you have a social security number, the first 3 numbers are going to define where you were born within the country. So I believe that a lot of them around here are 476, which means northern Minnesota. So I want to get the first part of the quick brown fox is equal to, and I want to go from the left side, left, and it says first, what's the text? The text is what's ever in A1, comma, and now how many numbers? It actually is something called zero start. So it's going to say THE, that's going to be 3 space 4 Q. So if I'm looking for 5 numbers, it says the Q. First 5 are this. What happens if I want to go from the right hand side? I want to get the last ones. Well, that's right. And paren, or start paren, that text, and I want to come in, say, another 5 characters. So it's going to say, well, let's go 7 characters in this case. So it's going to say OWN space FOX. Awesome. Now, what happens if I was trying to get in the middle of it? Now, in the middle, on our social security numbers again, the middle 2 kind of define what era you're in. So first say where you are, the second one is what era you're in. So I want to grab the middle of that, and to do that, that's going to be mid. So mid, what's the text? This part right here. The start number, I'm going to go in, say 5. So I believe that that starts me off with Q, but it's going to say QUICK. So I'm going to say I want 5 of those. Oops, not 55. 5 comma 5. Quick, because this one is starts off at 1. THE space. The fifth one is the one that I want to start with, Q, and I want 5 characters. So that goes quick. All right, and that happens to be one of the questions that I will ask at the end of this. The question is break apart strings, and we want to say it's going to be left. Don't put an equals in front of it. It's just all lowercase left, so L-E-F-T. That's all you need to type in and hit enter, and it should work. And again, the most used function is IF, and don't put in an equal sign or anything like that. And then the mid string is going to be another one, MID. Awesome. Let's work on a few others. So I want to be able to find a certain thing, because you might have a large sentence worth of information, and I want to grab a certain part where it comes in after it. I use this for my logs. When there's logs of a web traffic, I need to find people who are doing certain things. So I want to find it when this happens. So I'm going to say is equal to find, and it returns the starting position of a piece of text. So I want to find the word quick within what text, and that's going to be whatever in A4. Boom. So I knew that I could start off at 5. So no matter how many letters I have at the left-hand side, it starts off with quick. If I go ahead and say the really quick Fox, now it changes to say the 12. So I could say, if I was looking to find stuff after quick, I could say 12 plus 5 gets me to the end, and I can grab the rest of the string. Now, how much of the string is? How big is the string? Well, that's going to be length, or len, is equal to len, paren. And the length of the quick brown fox is equal to 19. So I would say starting at 12 and go for 19 minus 12 will give me brown fox. All right, beautiful. Coffee. Okay, so for the last 2 or 3 minutes here, I'm again, let's make sure that I got everything. Oh, no, I have 2 more things. I'm glad I looked. All right. Now, even though I've put it in here under functions, it's more of something that would go along with when you're building functions. So, my oldest daughter, she's a pretty good photog. So I said, when she was a junior in high school, I said, oh, you should take all the money that you got from doing senior portraits and all of your Christmas money, you should put it into a CD right now, or an IRA, and you're going to get so much more interest off of that because you started quite a few years earlier than everybody else. So I wanted to show her how to do this. So I was talking about compounding interest, and that's it. We're going to say 5%. Don't laugh. Now I'm going to say that she can get $1,000 scraped up. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to say, hey, at the end of year 1, you're going to have whatever was what you started with, $1,000, and then you're going to add to it whatever you had times how much of an interest they're going to give you. And when I hit enter, then I got 1,050. That blew her little mind because they're like, they'll give you money when you just put money in there? Yes. Just leave it there and they give you money. So the great part is that you're going to have more money when you start the next year. So I'm going to say is equal to whatever you started with or whatever you ended with on the last year. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it down, and then if I take both of those and drag it down, I can see that I have a little bit of a problem. Now, the pound sign, or the pound signs mean that it's too big. Pound num means that it's actually too big for Excel. So it's like, wow, if I go ahead and make this a little bit bigger, I can see that, hey, by year 3, she's a millionaire. By year 4, she's a billionaire. She really liked this because she would be retiring, after year 5, but it wasn't quite accurate. The reason was because if I come down here to the first one that really gets messed up, in F2 to get me into the function, it says take whatever is in C7 and multiply it by 1,050. No, it should be up there with the 5%. But why isn't it? Well, when I was copying it down, it was moving what it was multiplying to, and then the next one was 0, and then this one was 1,050. So I should change that formula. What I'd like to do is I'd like it to always look at the 5%. So if I want it to always remain one particular cell, I'm going to put a $ in front of the D and a $ in front of the 3, which says, as I copy this down or across, always stay in column D, always stay on row 3. Enter, double click, and now it seems to be a little bit more realistic. Now, this is used so frequently that there is actually a shortcut to this. So if I have D3 and I want to make that into an absolute reference, I'm going to hit F4. Again, that's a little bit, that's 2 to the right of F2. And if I hit F4, that gives me a $D, $3, which makes it into an absolute reference. Now, if I hit it again, what that says is it says D, $3. Means that if I move it left or right, it's going to change the column it's in, but it will always remain at that row 3. Hit F4 again, $D3, which means it's always going to stay in column D, but as I move up and down, it's going to change the 3. Hit F4 one last time, and now it's D3, which is a relative reference. All right, beautiful. The reason that I was also showing you this was it's because I wanted to talk about named ranges. Before, when I was doing if and a few other ones, I said put in the text, and I always said quotes. You might be going, why are you saying that so precisely? Because if I would put in a word, sometimes it says like pound name. So I'm going to say to the tune of, if this guy is less than 1, which it is, put in yes, otherwise no. And it's going to say pound name because it doesn't understand it. It says there's no name, which you wanted to do was put it in quotes, right? Or I can name a cell. So, for example, compounding interest D3, that's the number, or that's the percentage that I'm looking for. So instead of just saying that, yes, this is D3, what I could do is I could actually rename that cell. Up here, I could see that I have a box that just says, yep, there's D3. Now, instead of just saying D3, I'm going to click in there and I can say compound interest. No spaces. There can names, no spaces. So it can be uppercase, lowercase, whatever, no spaces. If you want to put in a space, you can put in an underscore if you wish, but I don't put in spaces. All right, compounding interest. Now, if I wanted to use this again, say I wanted to take that 1,000 and multiply it by the compounding interest again, I could say is equal to whatever is in C5 and then times COU. As I'm typing this out, it's showing me all the functions, COM, and I could see that one of them, one of them says compound interest, what I named it. Tab, and then it says, yep, there's compound interest, 5%, n per n, and that's, or whatever, and it gives me $50. All right, so you can actually rename a cell, and it's going to come out to be very helpful when you copy things down if you're looking at a particular cell, because it will always look at that cell. Compound interest, copy it down. So it's the same thing as if you use $signs. All right, now, last thing I was going to show, which is my orders. Again, getting back to real life. These are the orders that we were playing with before, and in one of these items, I could see that people have practice jersey, and then in here, I have their jersey number. Now, they, of course, asked, they said, okay, what are all the jersey numbers? Make sure that they were all unique. And I was like, oh, crap, they're all kind of made into this item. But we could break that apart using what we know now. So let me move over here. And then zoom in a little bit. All right. So, practice jersey 2. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find out if there is a practice jersey hyphen in there. So I'm going to say is equal to find, paren. The text that I'm looking for is, let's just call it jersey. And I'm looking for it within V8. Sure enough, I found it at 10. Awesome. So now I want to try to find the jersey that they have. Is equal to mid, because I'm looking for something within it. I'm going to find the text in here, comma. Now the start number. I know that I found jersey at this cell location, but I want to add to it the JERSEY, that's 6, space, hyphen, space. So I'm looking for 8 characters, plus 8 characters, comma, and now how many characters do I want? I want 2 characters. And paren. Oops. Boom. Ha! Let's see. That probably should have been 9. Look at that. And then it's 02. So I would be able to copy this guy down. And I would get things like, oh, did I have a find? Oops. Nope, I need this. Right there. So some of them came out as values, but this one, they found that practice jersey 42. Practice jersey 21. And I would just do something like pound, if pound error kind of thing, then just make it a blank. All right, so again, used my formulas up before, and with any luck, I got you out of there a little bit less than the hour. Remember, most used function is if, the breaking apart things is left, and if you want middle strings, that's mid, no equals, just put it in all lowercase. All right, hopefully better luck when you guys do it this time around.